Before our history books began, there were stories of cities lost to the sea, realms buried under earth, and civilizations whispered of in legend. Were they myths, metaphors, or forgotten truths? Tonight, we begin our journey into the mystery of what once was and might still be. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean at twilight, watching waves roll endlessly toward shore. Beneath those waters lie secrets older than memory. Temple foundations rest on sandy floors, their stone corridors once echoing with voices we will never hear. In jungles across the world, pyramids sleep under blankets of green, their builders vanished like morning mist. Ancient maps show lands that no longer exist. Glowing parchments speak of islands swallowed by time, of mountain kingdoms hidden behind clouds, of underground cities where wisdom was preserved through ages of darkness. These are not mere fantasies born from idle minds. They are threads in a tapestry we are only beginning to understand. The earth remembers what we have forgotten, in layers of rock and silt, in the songs of indigenous peoples, in the sacred texts of every culture. The same stories appear again and again. Great floods that reshaped the world, builders who worked with stones too massive for any crane, flying machines that crossed ancient skies, teachers who came from beyond the stars to share their knowledge with early humanity. Perhaps these civilizations were not lost at all, but waiting to be remembered. In stone monuments that defy explanation, in myths that cross every ocean, in the deepest parts of ourselves where wonder still lives, they call to us. They whisper of a time when the world was young and full of possibilities we can barely imagine. As we drift through these stories together, let your mind wander freely. Picture misty ruins emerging from ocean depths, their walls carved with symbols that speak in languages older than words. See jungle temples where sunlight filters through leaves, illuminating carvings that tell of visitors from distant worlds. Feel the presence of those who came before us, their footsteps still echoing in the places where earth meets sky. The journey we are about to take will carry us across continents and through millennia. We will walk with the shadow of Atlantis, descend into the hidden realms beneath our feet, and stand among the megaliths that predate our earliest civilizations. We will sail with the Serpent kings of the East, witness the sky battles of ancient India, and search for the golden cities of the Americas. Each story we explore tonight is a doorway, an invitation to step beyond the boundaries of what we think we know. In the gentle rhythm of these ancient mysteries, in the soft cadence of forgotten names, we find not just entertainment, but a deeper connection to the endless story of human wonder and the eternal quest to understand our place in the cosmos. In the writings of Plato, we find one of history's most enduring mysteries. Around 400 BC, this Greek philosopher penned two dialogues that would capture human imagination for millennia to come. In the Timaeus and Critias, he spoke of a magnificent island civilization that had vanished beneath the waves 9,000 years before his own time. Atlantis, as Plato described it, was no mere fantasy. His account reads with the precision of a historical document. He spoke of an island larger than Libya and Asia combined, positioned beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. This was a land of concentric rings, alternating between water and earth, with a great central temple dedicated to Poseidon, god of the sea. The Atlanteans, according to Plato, were a maritime people of extraordinary skill. They had conquered parts of Europe and Africa, ruling with wisdom and justice for generations. But pride corrupted their noble hearts, and the gods grew angry. In a single day and night of catastrophic earthquakes and floods, their entire civilization disappeared beneath the ocean, leaving only muddy shoals where once a great culture had thrived. For centuries, scholars have debated whether Plato invented this tale as a philosophical allegory or whether he preserved the memory of an actual lost civilization. The date he gives, 9600 BC, places Atlantis at the end of the last ice age, a time when our planet underwent dramatic changes. Great ice sheets melted, sea levels rose by hundreds of feet, and entire coastlines were transformed beyond recognition. This period, known as the Younger Dryas, was marked by sudden climate shifts that could have destroyed coastal civilizations across the globe. Geological evidence shows that around 11,700 years ago, the world entered a brief but intense cold period, followed by rapid warming that caused massive flooding. Could this be the catastrophe that Plato described? But Atlantis may not have been alone in its fate. In the same region where Plato placed his lost island, there once existed a real civilization that vanished just as mysteriously. The Tartessians lived in what is now southwestern Spain, along the banks of the Guadalquivir River. Ancient sources describe them as a wealthy, sophisticated people who traded precious metals across the Mediterranean. Tartessos was renowned for its silver mines and skilled craftsmen. The city controlled trade routes between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, growing rich from commerce with distant lands. Greek and Phoenician merchants spoke of Tartessian kings who ruled with wisdom and justice, their palace walls adorned with precious metals and their ships sailing to the furthest reaches of the known world. Yet around 500 BC, Tartessos simply disappeared. No armies conquered it, no natural disaster is recorded in historical texts. The city and its people vanished as completely as if they had never existed, leaving only scattered ruins and the faint echo of their name in ancient writings. Modern researchers have found intriguing connections between Tartessos and Plato's Atlantis. Both were located in the same general region, both were maritime civilizations that controlled important trade routes, and both disappeared suddenly and mysteriously. Some scholars wonder if Plato's account of Atlantis might have been based on distorted memories of the real Tartessian civilization. The marshlands of Doñana, near the mouth of the Guadalquivir River, have yielded tantalizing clues. Satellite imagery reveals geometric patterns beneath the wetlands, suggesting the presence of ancient structures. Archaeological surveys have uncovered evidence of a sophisticated drainage system, circular formations that mirror Plato's description of Atlantis, and artifacts that point to a culture more advanced than previously believed. Could it be that Tartessos was not just a trading post, but the remnant of something far greater? Perhaps it was the last vestige of a much older civilization, one that had indeed flourished during the Ice Age and survived in reduced form until classical times. When the final collapse came, it may have seemed to observers as if an entire world had vanished overnight. The muddy shoals that Plato mentioned as marking the location of sunken Atlantis match perfectly with the sandbanks and marshes found today at the mouth of the Guadalquivir. Ancient mariners knew these waters as treacherous, filled with shifting sands that could trap the unwary. Perhaps these hazards were not just natural formations, but the visible remains of a drowned civilization. The muddy shoals that Plato mentioned as marking the location of sunken Atlantis match perfectly with the sandbanks and marshes found today at the mouth of the Guadalquivir. Ancient mariners knew these waters as treacherous, filled with shifting sands that could trap the unwary. Perhaps these hazards were not just natural formations, but the visible remains of a drowned civilization. When we examine Plato's account more closely, we discover details that seem too specific to be mere invention. He describes the layout of Atlantis with mathematical precision, speaking of circular zones that alternated between land and water, each ring connected by bridges and canals. The central island, he tells us, was 50 stadia in diameter, surrounded by rings of water and land that extended outward like ripples on a pond. The temple at the heart of this civilization was dedicated to Poseidon and his mortal wife, Cleito. Plato describes walls covered in brass, tin, and the mysterious metal called orichalcum, which gleamed like fire. Within the temple stood a golden statue of Poseidon driving 6 winged horses, so tall it touched the ceiling. Around the god were arranged 100 sea nymphs riding dolphins, their faces turned toward their divine lord. The Atlanteans themselves were described as a noble race, descended from the union of god and mortal. For many generations, they ruled justly over their island paradise and the lands beyond. They built magnificent harbors where ships from across the known world came to trade. Their military was formidable with over 1 million warriors, but they used their strength to protect rather than conquer. Yet as centuries passed, the divine spark within them began to fade. The blood of the gods grew thin, diluted by too many mortal generations. Pride replaced wisdom, greed overcame justice, and the Atlanteans began to look with hungry eyes upon the lands of their neighbors. They assembled great armies and fleets, preparing to conquer Egypt, Greece, and all the peoples of the eastern Mediterranean. It was then that Zeus, king of the gods, called a council on Mount Olympus. The corruption of Atlantis could not be allowed to spread. In a single day and night of earthquakes and floods, the island civilization was swallowed by the sea. Where once proud cities had stood, only unnavigable waters remained, thick with mud and debris from the catastrophe. This destruction, Plato tells us, occurred 9,000 years before the time of Solon, the Athenian lawgiver who first heard the tale during his travels in Egypt. The priests of Sais, an ancient city in the Nile Delta, preserved the memory in their sacred records. They spoke of how their ancestors had once repelled the Atlantean invasion, shortly before the great island vanished forever. The timing of this catastrophe aligns remarkably with what geology tells us about the end of the last ice age. Around 11,700 years ago, the world experienced a period of rapid climate change known as the Younger Dryas. Massive ice sheets that had covered much of North America and Europe began to melt, causing sea levels to rise by hundreds of feet in just a few thousand years. This was not a gradual process but occurred in sudden, catastrophic pulses. Evidence from ice cores and ocean sediments shows that the climate could shift dramatically within decades or even years. Coastal civilizations that had flourished during the Ice Age would have found their cities submerged beneath rising seas, their populations scattered to higher ground. The Mediterranean itself was transformed during this period. What had once been a much smaller body of water with extensive coastal plains and river valleys became the sea we know today. Islands that had supported thriving communities were reduced to scattered peaks or disappeared entirely beneath the waves. The Black Sea, which had been a freshwater lake, was suddenly flooded when rising Mediterranean waters breached the narrow barrier at the Bosporus. These geological facts lend credibility to Plato's account, but they also raise intriguing questions about Tartessos. If this Spanish civilization was indeed connected to Atlantis, it might represent not just a trading city, but the last remnant of a much older and more extensive culture. The wealth that made Tartessos famous throughout the ancient world might have been inherited from ancestors who had once ruled a maritime empire spanning the Atlantic. The archaeological evidence from the Doñana marshes supports this possibility. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed structures beneath the wetlands that match Plato's description of Atlantis in remarkable detail. Circular formations alternate with linear features that could be the remains of canals and harbors. The scale of these buried structures suggests a civilization far more sophisticated than anything previously known from prehistoric Iberia. Recent excavations have uncovered evidence of advanced metallurgy and engineering techniques that predate similar developments elsewhere in Europe by thousands of years. The Tartessians were skilled in working with silver, gold, and bronze, creating artifacts of extraordinary beauty and complexity. Their jewelry displays artistic motifs that appear nowhere else in the ancient world, suggesting contact with distant cultures or perhaps the preservation of much older traditions. The sudden disappearance of Tartessos around 500 BC remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Unlike other ancient civilizations that left clear evidence of their decline, Tartessos simply vanished without a trace. No layer of destruction marks their end. No evidence of conquest or natural disaster explains their fate. It is as if an entire people simply chose to disappear, taking their secrets with them. Some researchers have proposed that the Tartessians may have been the descendants of Atlantean survivors, refugees who had fled the Great Catastrophe and established a new civilization in the familiar waters of the Atlantic coast. Over thousands of years, they preserved fragments of their ancestors' knowledge, adapting to a changed world while maintaining their maritime traditions. The location of Tartessos at the mouth of the Guadalquivir River would have made it a natural gateway between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, just as Plato described Atlantis as controlling the passage through the Pillars of Hercules. The river itself may have been far more navigable in ancient times, allowing large ships to sail inland to trading centers that are now beyond the reach of even small boats. Local legends speak of a golden age when the waters ran deeper and the land was more fertile. Folk tales tell of cities that once stood where now only marshes remain, of palaces that sank beneath the waves when the gods grew angry with human pride. These stories, passed down through generations of fishermen and farmers, echo the themes of Plato's Atlantis tale with remarkable consistency. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote of Tartessos as a place of incredible wealth, where silver was so abundant that the Tartessians made their everyday utensils from precious metals. He described ships returning from Spanish ports with holds full of treasure, their crews speaking of kings who ruled from palaces lined with gold and silver. Yet by the time of the Roman conquest, these wealthy cities had already become legends. Modern satellite imagery continues to reveal new mysteries in the Andalusian landscape. Geometric patterns visible from space suggest the presence of ancient field systems, harbors, and settlements far more extensive than anything recorded in classical sources. The Guadalquivir Delta appears to have been heavily modified by human activity, with channels, embankments, and artificial islands that speak of sophisticated hydraulic engineering. As we contemplate these twin shadows of the West, Atlantis and Tartessos, we are reminded that the boundary between myth and history is often thinner than we imagine. In the gentle lapping of waves against Spanish shores, in the mist that rises from ancient marshlands, we hear the whispers of a people who once looked out upon the same ocean and dreamed of distant horizons. Their voices carry across the centuries, asking us to remember what the waters have claimed and to wonder what other secrets lie sleeping beneath the waves. The story of Atlantis and Tartessos teaches us that civilizations can vanish as completely as if they had never existed, leaving only fragments of memory embedded in myth and legend. Yet these fragments, when examined with patient care, may prove to be more than mere fantasy. They may be the last testimony of peoples who once walked the same earth we inhabit, who gazed upon the same stars and wondered at the same mysteries that captivate us today. Beneath our feet, according to ancient traditions from across the globe, lies another world entirely. Not the molten core that modern science describes, but a realm of hidden cities, underground kingdoms, and enlightened beings who have preserved the wisdom of ages past. From the monasteries of Tibet to the sacred caves of India, from the mysterious passages beneath the Himalayas to the unexplored depths of Antarctica, stories persist of a civilization that dwells in the hollow spaces of our Earth. The name most often whispered in these tales is Agartha, sometimes called Agarthi or Agartha. This is said to be the capital of the inner world, a city of crystal and light where the king of the world holds court. According to Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Agartha is not merely a physical place, but a spiritual realm where enlightened masters preserve the ancient teachings, waiting for the day when surface humanity will be ready to receive their wisdom once again. In the sacred texts of Hinduism and Buddhism, we find references to underground cities that stretch for thousands of miles beneath the Earth's surface. The Ramayana speaks of the Patala realm, a subterranean world inhabited by the Nagas, serpent beings of great wisdom and power. These underground dwellers are described not as enemies of humanity, but as guardians of secret knowledge, keepers of technologies and sciences that surface civilizations have long forgotten. The concept of Shambhala, the mythical kingdom hidden somewhere in the mountains of Central Asia, intertwines with these stories of underground realms. Some traditions place Shambhala in a valley concealed by perpetual mists, while others describe it as existing in a dimension that overlaps our own. Still others speak of it as an underground city, accessible only through hidden passages in the Himalayas, where the snow never melts and the peaks touch the very roof of the world. Mount Kailash, sacred to Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and followers of the ancient Bon religion, stands at the heart of many underground realm legends. This perfect pyramid of stone rising from the remote reaches of Tibet is said to be the earthly manifestation of Mount Meru, the cosmic mountain that serves as the axis of the universe. Pilgrims who have journeyed to Kailash speak of caves and passages that seem to lead deep into the mountain's heart, though few dare to explore these mysterious openings. Local Tibetan guides tell of tunnels that connect Mount Kailash to other sacred sites across Asia, an underground network that spans thousands of miles. They speak of monks who have spent decades exploring these passages, returning with tales of vast caverns lit by an inner light, of underground lakes that reflect stars invisible to surface dwellers, and of cities where time moves differently than in the world above. The Theosophical movement of the late 1800s brought these Eastern traditions to Western attention, but not without controversy. Helena Blavatsky, one of the movement's founders, claimed to have received teachings from hidden masters who dwelt in underground retreats. She described a vast network of tunnels beneath the Himalayas, connecting secret libraries where the history of humanity was preserved in its entirety. According to theosophical teachings, these underground dwellers were not primitive cave dwellers, but representatives of an advanced civilization that had withdrawn from the surface world during times of great cataclysm. They possessed technologies beyond our current understanding, including the ability to travel vast distances through the Earth's interior, using vehicles that moved along magnetic currents deep beneath the surface. The explorer Ferdinand Ossendowski, traveling through Mongolia and Tibet in the early 1920s, encountered lamas who spoke of the King of the World, a mysterious figure who ruled from an underground palace. These holy men described a vast subterranean kingdom where hundreds of thousands of people lived in cities carved from living rock, their halls lit by a strange radiance that needed no fuel and cast no shadows. Ossendowski's guides told him of passages that led downward from remote monasteries, tunnels that connected to a network spanning the entire Asian continent. They spoke of underground rivers that flowed for hundreds of miles without ever seeing sunlight, of caverns so vast that their ceilings were lost in darkness, and of acoustic phenomena that allowed whispered messages to travel incredible distances through the Earth's depths. The stories took on a darker tone during the years leading up to World War II, when reports surfaced of German expeditions to Tibet and Antarctica. These ventures were officially described as scientific research, but rumors persisted of a search for entrance points to the inner world. Some claimed that Nazi occultists believed they could find allies among the underground dwellers, beings who possessed advanced technologies that could change the course of the war. Admiral Richard Byrd, the famous American polar explorer, became central to many of these tales after his flights over the North and South Poles. According to some accounts, Byrd reported seeing land beyond the poles where no land should exist, territories that appeared green and fertile despite being located in regions of perpetual ice. His alleged diary entries, though disputed by historians, describe encounters with beings who possessed flying craft of incredible sophistication. The Antarctic continent, with its miles-thick ice sheet and unexplored interior, has become a focal point for modern hollow Earth theories. Satellite images reveal strange formations beneath the ice, geometric patterns that some interpret as evidence of artificial structures. Magnetic anomalies detected in certain regions suggest the presence of metallic objects or hollow spaces far beneath the surface. Underground passages and vast cavern systems exist throughout our planet, from the limestone caves of Kentucky to the volcanic tubes of Hawaii. The Mammoth Cave system in the United States extends for hundreds of miles, with new passages still being discovered. In Vietnam, the Sun Tra Cave is so enormous that it contains its own weather systems, with clouds forming in its upper reaches and underground rivers flowing through chambers large enough to hold entire city blocks. These natural wonders demonstrate that our planet is far more hollow than most people imagine. The Earth's crust is riddled with caves, tunnels, and caverns, many of which have never been fully explored. Could some of these natural passages connect to form a network vast enough to support hidden civilizations? The possibility seems less fantastic when we consider the scale of underground systems that we know exist. Ancient texts from India describe the Patala realm as consisting of 7 levels, each with its own cities and inhabitants. The deepest level, called Nagaloka, is said to be the home of the Nagas, serpent beings who possess great wisdom and magical powers. These creatures are described as sometimes hostile to surface dwellers, but more often as benevolent guardians of ancient knowledge. The Buddhist concept of the underground kingdom includes detailed descriptions of cities built around vast caverns, their walls decorated with precious stones that provide illumination. The inhabitants of these cities are said to live for thousands of years, their extended lifespans allowing them to accumulate wisdom and knowledge far beyond what surface humans can achieve in their brief existence. Tibetan monks have preserved maps showing the location of entrances to the underground realm, though these charts are written in symbolic language that requires initiation to understand. The maps speak of passages hidden behind waterfalls, of doorways concealed within seemingly solid rock faces, and of caves that appear ordinary on the surface but lead to tunnels extending for hundreds of miles underground. The tradition of hidden masters dwelling in underground retreats persists in modern times. Stories circulate of travelers who have encountered these beings in remote mountain caves, describing them as possessing an otherworldly serenity and knowledge that seems to encompass all of human history. These masters are said to emerge occasionally to guide humanity through times of crisis, appearing as teachers and advisors before vanishing back into their hidden realm. Whether we interpret these stories as literal truth or as metaphors for deeper spiritual realities, they speak to a universal human intuition that there is more to our world than what appears on the surface. The idea that wisdom and knowledge might be preserved in hidden places, protected from the upheavals and destructions that periodically sweep across the surface world, offers both comfort and hope. In the quiet depths of caves and caverns, where eternal darkness reigns and the sounds of the surface world never penetrate, we might indeed find something approaching the peace and timelessness that the legends describe. Whether literal or symbolic, the underground realm represents a part of human experience that transcends the ordinary world of conflict and change, a place where the deepest truths about existence might be discovered and preserved for future generations. As we drift deeper into these mysteries, we are reminded that the earth beneath our feet holds secrets we have barely begun to explore. In the silence of underground chambers, in the mystery of passages that lead into darkness, we sense the presence of something greater than ourselves, something that connects us to the vast and ancient story of our planet and our place within it. In the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, where the modern world meets the ancient past, archaeologists have uncovered evidence that challenges everything we thought we knew about early human civilization. Here, at a site called Gobekli Tepe, massive stone pillars carved with intricate reliefs rise from the earth like sentinels from a forgotten age. These monuments, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older even than agriculture itself, speak of a time when our ancestors possessed knowledge and capabilities that have been lost to the mists of prehistory. Gobekli Tepe, whose name means belly hill in Turkish, was first noticed by archaeologists in the 1960s, but its true significance was not understood until Klaus Schmidt began excavations in the 1990s. What he found defied all conventional understanding of human development. Here were massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in precise circles and carved with elaborate images of animals, symbols, and abstract designs. The site dates to approximately 9,600 BC, making it nearly 12,000 years old. This places its construction at the very end of the last ice age, when most of humanity was still living as hunter-gatherers. According to traditional archaeological theory, complex monumental architecture should not have been possible until after the development of agriculture, when settled communities could support the specialized craftsmen needed for such projects. Yet Gobekli Tepe predates agriculture by at least 1,000 years. The people who built these magnificent structures were nomadic hunter-gatherers who somehow possessed the organizational skills, technical knowledge, and artistic vision to create monuments that rival anything built by later civilizations. The implications are staggering, suggesting that our understanding of human development may be fundamentally flawed. The pillars themselves are masterworks of stone carving, decorated with reliefs of lions, bulls, foxes, cranes, and serpents. Some display symbols that seem to represent constellations, while others show abstract patterns whose meaning remains mysterious. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, displaying a level of artistic sophistication that supposedly did not exist in the Stone Age. Most intriguing of all are the humanoid figures carved on some of the central pillars. These anthropomorphic columns have arms and hands but no faces, giving them an otherworldly quality that has led some researchers to speculate about their intended meaning. Were they meant to represent the builders themselves, gods or spirits they worshipped, or perhaps beings from elsewhere who taught them the secrets of monumental construction? The site consists of multiple circular structures, each containing its own arrangement of pillars and carved reliefs. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed that much of Gobekli Tepe remains unexcavated, with additional circles and structures still buried beneath the soil. Current estimates suggest that only about 5% of the site has been uncovered, leaving the vast majority of its secrets still hidden underground. Perhaps most mysteriously of all, Gobekli Tepe appears to have been deliberately buried around 8000 BC. Thousands of tons of earth and stones were carefully placed over the structures, creating the artificial hill that gave the site its modern name. This was not the gradual accumulation of wind-blown sediment or natural erosion, but a purposeful act of concealment that preserved the monuments for millennia. Why would a people go to such enormous effort to bury their most sacred site? Some researchers suggest that changing climate conditions made the area uninhabitable, forcing the builders to abandon their creation. Others propose that the burial was a ritual act, perhaps intended to protect the site from desecration or to preserve it for future generations who would understand its true purpose. Recent discoveries have revealed that Gobekli Tepe was not unique. Just 30 miles away, archaeologists have uncovered Karahan Tepe, another complex of stone circles and carved pillars that appears to be contemporary with its more famous neighbor. The similarities between the two sites are striking, suggesting they were built by the same culture or perhaps represent different chapters in a continuing tradition. Karahan Tepe contains structures that may be even more mysterious than those at Gobekli Tepe. Here, archaeologists have found what appear to be human heads carved in relief, their eyes wide and staring, their expressions enigmatic. Some of these sculptures display a level of anatomical detail that seems almost impossibly sophisticated for Stone Age artists. The discoveries in Turkey are part of a growing body of evidence that suggests complex civilizations may have existed far earlier than previously believed. In Egypt, the Great Sphinx and certain elements of the Giza complex display characteristics that some researchers interpret as evidence of much greater antiquity than officially accepted. The Osirian tradition in Egypt speaks of a time before the pharaohs, when god-kings ruled the Nile Valley and possessed knowledge that was later lost. According to these ancient texts, the earliest monuments were not built by the pharaohs we know from history, but by a much older civilization that existed during what Egyptologists call the Zep Tepi, or first time. The Sphinx, with its weathered limestone body and enigmatic expression, has become central to debates about ancient Egyptian chronology. Geological analysis of the erosion patterns on the monument suggests that it may have been exposed to heavy rainfall for extended periods, indicating construction during a time when Egypt's climate was much wetter than it is today. This would place the Sphinx's creation thousands of years earlier than the traditional date of 2500 BC. Similarly, the massive granite blocks that form the core of certain pyramids and temples display tool marks and construction techniques that some researchers argue are inconsistent with the copper and bronze tools available to ancient Egyptian workers. The precision of the cuts, the smoothness of the surfaces, and the intricate joinery suggest the use of advanced tools and techniques that have not been adequately explained by conventional archaeology. The Osirian at Abydos, a mysterious underground structure built from massive granite blocks, presents another puzzle. Unlike typical Egyptian temples with their decorated walls and elaborate hieroglyphic inscriptions, the Osirian is almost stark in its simplicity. Its Cyclopean masonry and megalithic construction techniques seem to belong to a much earlier tradition than the dynastic period of Egyptian history. Some researchers have proposed that these anomalous structures represent evidence of a lost civilization that preceded dynastic Egypt by thousands of years. According to this theory, the pharaohs inherited certain monuments from their predecessors, adding their own decorations and inscriptions to structures they did not originally build. This would explain why some of the most impressive Egyptian monuments seem so different in style and construction technique from others built during the same supposed time period. The concept of a global megalithic tradition is supported by evidence from around the world. In Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman displays masonry techniques remarkably similar to those found in Egypt and Turkey. Massive stones weighing hundreds of tons are fitted together with such precision that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. The blocks are cut in complex polygonal shapes that interlock like pieces of a three-dimensional puzzle. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, archaeologists have found stone blocks cut with such accuracy that they appear to have been shaped by machine tools. The surfaces are flat to within fractions of an inch, and the angles are precise to within minutes of arc. The H-shaped blocks are identical to each other, as if mass-produced according to a standardized template. These global similarities suggest that the builders of megalithic monuments may have shared common knowledge and techniques, possibly derived from a single source. Whether this source was a lost civilization, a worldwide priesthood of builders, or something even more mysterious remains one of archaeology's greatest enigmas. The astronomical alignments found at many megalithic sites add another layer of complexity to the puzzle. Gobekli Tepe appears to have been oriented towards specific star patterns, with some researchers suggesting that its pillars may represent a stone map of the ancient sky. The site's builders demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and geometry, creating monuments that tracked celestial movements with remarkable precision. This astronomical knowledge was not limited to Turkey. Megalithic sites around the world display similar characteristics, with many oriented towards solstices, equinoxes, and the rising of specific stars or constellations. The builders of these monuments clearly possessed a deep understanding of celestial mechanics that rivals our modern knowledge in many respects. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond archaeology into questions about the nature of human civilization itself. If complex societies existed 12,000 years ago, what happened to them? Were they destroyed by the climate changes that marked the end of the Ice Age, or did they deliberately conceal their achievements before vanishing into legend? The deliberate burial of Gobekli Tepe suggests that its builders possessed knowledge of future events, perhaps understanding that their civilization was coming to an end. By carefully preserving their monuments, they may have intended to leave a message for future generations, a record of their achievements that would survive long after their culture had been forgotten. As we contemplate these massive stones and their enigmatic carvings, we are reminded that human history may be far older and more complex than we have imagined. In the silence of these ancient places, where shadows fall across carved reliefs and massive pillars reach toward the sky, we sense the presence of those who came before us. Builders whose knowledge and capabilities challenge our understanding of the past and force us to reconsider our assumptions about the development of human civilization. The stones remember what we have forgotten, and in their patient endurance, they offer glimpses of a time when humanity possessed wisdom and skills that have been lost to the ages. As the soft light of dawn illuminates these ancient monuments, we are invited to imagine a world where the boundaries between the possible and impossible were drawn very differently than they are today. In the warm waters of the Indian Ocean, where ancient trade routes once carried spices and precious stones between distant lands, legends speak of civilizations that vanished beneath the waves long before recorded history began. These are the stories of Lemuria and Mu, of the serpent kings called Nagas, and of underwater cities where wisdom was preserved through ages of darkness. From the coral atolls of the Pacific to the monsoon-swept coasts of India, the same tales appear again and again, carried in the songs of fishermen and the sacred texts of temples. The concept of Lemuria first emerged in the 19th century, when scientists noticed striking similarities between fossils and rock formations found on opposite sides of the Indian Ocean. The same species of plants and animals appeared in India, Madagascar, and Australia, separated by thousands of miles of open water. To explain these connections, geologists proposed that a vast continent had once linked these distant lands, a bridge of earth that they named Lemuria after the lemur fossils found throughout the region. As scientific understanding advanced, the theory of continental drift provided a different explanation for these geological puzzles. The ancient supercontinent of Gondwana had indeed connected these regions, but this occurred hundreds of millions of years ago, long before complex life existed on Earth. Yet the name Lemuria had already captured the imagination of mystics and theosophists who wove it into elaborate theories about lost civilizations and vanished races. Helena Blavatsky and her followers described Lemuria as the home of the third root race of humanity, beings of enormous size who possessed psychic powers and communicated telepathically. According to theosophical teachings, these Lemurians lived on a vast continent that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Indian Ocean, encompassing much of what is now underwater. Their civilization was said to be spiritual rather than technological, with inhabitants who could manipulate matter through will alone. The Tamil people of southern India preserved their own traditions of a lost continent called Kumari Kandam, which they described as the original homeland of their civilization. Ancient Tamil texts speak of a vast land that extended far into the Indian Ocean, containing 49 kingdoms and countless cities. This continent was gradually consumed by the sea through a series of deluges, forcing the survivors to flee to the remaining highlands that became the India we know today. According to Tamil tradition, Kumari Kandam was the site of 3 great Tamil academies called Sangams, where poets and scholars gathered to preserve and develop their culture. The first 2 academies were destroyed when the sea claimed the lands on which they stood, but the 3rd academy survived in Madurai, carrying forward the accumulated wisdom of the lost continent. These stories suggest that Tamil civilization may be far older than commonly believed, with roots extending back to a time when the geography of the Indian Ocean was very different. The Nagas occupy a central place in these underwater traditions. Throughout Hindu and Buddhist mythology, these serpent beings are described as possessing great wisdom and magical powers. Unlike the evil serpents of Western tradition, the Nagas are generally portrayed as benevolent guardians of ancient knowledge, dwelling in underwater palaces decorated with pearls and precious stones. They are said to possess the ability to take human form when they choose to interact with surface dwellers. The Mahabharata and other ancient Indian texts describe the Nagas as a sophisticated civilization with their own kings, cities, and customs. Their capital, called Bhogavati, is said to be located beneath the earth or under the ocean, depending on the version of the story. This underwater city is described as more beautiful than any surface dwelling, with walls of crystal and gardens of coral where the Nagas cultivate wisdom as others might grow flowers. Archaeological discoveries along the Indian coast have revealed submerged structures that some researchers interpret as evidence of these lost civilizations. Off the coast of Gujarat, marine archaeologists have found the remains of what appears to be a large city, complete with fortifications, harbors, and residential areas. The site, now called Dwarka, corresponds to descriptions in ancient texts of a golden city that was submerged when Krishna departed from the earth. The discovery of Dwarka has challenged conventional understanding of Indian history, suggesting that sophisticated urban civilizations existed along the Indian coast much earlier than previously believed. The submerged structures display advanced urban planning and engineering, with evidence of a complex system of docks and channels that would have allowed large ships to navigate inland waterways. Carbon dating of artifacts from the site indicates that parts of the city may be over 8,000 years old. Similar discoveries have been made off the coast of Tamil Nadu, where sonar surveys have revealed geometric patterns on the ocean floor that suggest the presence of artificial structures. The town of Pumpuhar, mentioned in ancient Tamil literature as a great port city, appears to have had sections that are now completely underwater. Local fishermen have long reported finding carved stones and pottery in their nets when fishing in these waters. The coast of Japan has yielded perhaps the most spectacular evidence of submerged civilizations. Off the island of Yonaguni, divers have found massive stone structures that some researchers interpret as the remains of an ancient city. The Yonaguni monument, as it has come to be known, features what appear to be stepped pyramids, terraced platforms, and carved channels that suggest deliberate human construction. The debate over Yonaguni continues to divide experts. Skeptics argue that the formations are entirely natural, created by geological processes and erosion patterns over millions of years. Supporters of the artificial theory point to features that seem too regular and purposeful to be natural formations, including what appear to be stairways, corridors, and carved symbols. The controversy reflects the broader challenge of interpreting underwater archaeological sites, where erosion and marine growth can obscure the original nature of structures. The timing of these submersions corresponds roughly with the end of the last ice age, when melting glaciers caused sea levels to rise by hundreds of feet worldwide. Coastal civilizations that had flourished during the Ice Age would have found their cities gradually submerged, forcing populations to migrate to higher ground. This process was not always gradual, as geological evidence suggests that sea level rise sometimes occurred in sudden pulses that could flood vast areas in a matter of decades. The Polynesian islands scattered across the Pacific Ocean preserve their own traditions of lost lands and sunken kingdoms. The mythology of many island cultures speaks of larger landmasses that once connected the scattered atolls, creating pathways for migration and trade. While modern geography shows that most of these islands were formed by volcanic activity and have never been connected, the rising seas of the post-glacial period would have submerged many low-lying areas and reduced larger islands to smaller remnants. Madagascar, the great island off the eastern coast of Africa, has been proposed by some researchers as a possible remnant of Lemuria. The island's unique flora and fauna, including many species found nowhere else on Earth, suggests that it has been isolated for millions of years. Yet its human population shows genetic connections to both Africa and Southeast Asia, indicating complex patterns of migration and settlement that are still being unraveled by scientists. The oral traditions of Madagascar speak of early inhabitants who possessed advanced knowledge of astronomy and navigation. These stories describe people who could predict eclipses, chart the movements of stars, and navigate vast distances across open ocean using techniques that were supposedly unknown to ancient civilizations. Some of these traditions mention underwater cities off the coast, where the ancestors once lived before the sea claimed their lands. The concept of serpent wisdom appears in cultures throughout the Indian Ocean region, from the Nagas of India to the dragon kings of Southeast Asia. In Cambodia, the founding myth of the Khmer civilization tells of a Naga princess who married an Indian prince, uniting the wisdom of the serpent people with the knowledge of surface dwellers. The temples of Angkor are decorated with countless images of Nagas, their serpentine forms supporting bridges and adorning doorways as guardians of sacred space. Vietnamese tradition speaks of the dragon lords who ruled the land before human kings, benevolent beings who taught agriculture, writing, and the arts of civilization. These dragon kings are said to have retreated to underwater palaces when human populations grew too numerous, but they continue to watch over their former subjects and occasionally emerge to offer guidance during times of crisis. The consistency of these serpent traditions across such a vast geographical area suggests either common cultural origins or shared experiences that were later mythologized. The serpent, as a symbol of wisdom and hidden knowledge, appears in virtually every culture that has had contact with the Indian Ocean, creating a network of related stories that spans from Africa to Australia. Modern research into ocean floor topography has revealed features that support some aspects of these lost continent theories. The Kerguelen Plateau in the southern Indian Ocean was indeed above sea level during certain periods in Earth's geological past, forming a landmass that could have supported plant and animal life. Similarly, the Mascarene Plateau, which now includes Mauritius and Reunion, was once a much larger landmass that has been mostly submerged by changing sea levels and geological subsidence. While these geological discoveries don't support the existence of advanced human civilizations on these ancient landmasses, they do confirm that the geography of the Indian Ocean has changed dramatically over geological time. The ancestors of various species did indeed migrate between what are now isolated islands and continents, creating the biological connections that originally inspired the Lemuria hypothesis. The stories of the Nagas and the lost continent of Lemuria remind us that the boundary between myth and history is often more fluid than we might expect. Whether these tales preserve actual memories of submerged civilizations or represent symbolic descriptions of spiritual truths, they speak to universal human experiences of loss, transformation, and the search for wisdom that transcends the limitations of ordinary existence. In the gentle rhythm of waves against tropical shores, in the play of sunlight through clear ocean waters where coral gardens bloom in eternal silence, we might indeed sense the presence of something greater than ourselves. The Serpent Kings may dwell not in literal underwater palaces, but in the depths of human consciousness, guardians of knowledge that surfaces only when we are ready to receive it with appropriate reverence and understanding. As we drift through these ancient waters in our imagination, following the paths of migrating peoples and the flow of cultural exchange that connected distant shores, we are reminded that our planet's story is one of constant change and adaptation. Civilizations rise and fall, continents shift and merge, and the sea claims what the land once nurtured, but the essential human quest for meaning and connection continues across all boundaries of time and space. In the ancient Sanskrit texts of India, preserved in palm leaf manuscripts and carved into temple walls, we find descriptions of aerial vehicles that soar through the skies with capabilities that seem to belong more to science fiction than to the distant past. These are the Vimanas, flying machines piloted by gods and heroes in an age when the Earth was young and the boundaries between the possible and impossible were drawn very differently than they are today. The epic tales of the Mahabharata and Ramayana speak of aerial battles fought with weapons of incredible destructive power, of cities that could fly through the air, and of a civilization called the Rama Empire that once ruled from the sky itself. The word Vimana appears hundreds of times in ancient Sanskrit literature, describing vehicles that could travel not only through the Earth's atmosphere but into the realm of the stars themselves. These were not primitive balloons or gliders, but sophisticated craft capable of incredible speeds and maneuvers. The texts describe Vimanas that could become invisible, that could travel underwater as easily as through the air, and that possessed weapons capable of destroying entire armies in moments. The Vaimanika Shastra, an ancient text attributed to the sage Bharadwaja, provides detailed technical descriptions of these flying machines. It speaks of different types of Vimanas designed for different purposes, from small scout craft to massive vehicles capable of carrying hundreds of passengers. The text describes engines powered by mercury, navigation systems that used crystals and magnetic fields, and materials that were lighter than air yet stronger than steel. According to these ancient sources, the Vimanas were propelled by various means, including solar energy, atmospheric pressure, and mysterious forces that modern science is only beginning to understand. Some descriptions speak of engines that drew power directly from the sun through crystal focusing systems, while others mention propulsion methods based on sound vibrations or electromagnetic fields that could manipulate gravity itself. The level of technical detail in these ancient texts is extraordinary. The Vaimanika Shastra describes 32 different types of Vimanas, each with specific capabilities and design features. It provides instructions for constructing the vehicles, including detailed specifications for metals and alloys that must be used in their construction. Some of these materials are described in terms that suggest properties unknown to modern metallurgy, such as metals that could change their characteristics based on electrical or magnetic fields. The pilots of these ancient aircraft were said to require extensive training in sciences that encompassed not only the mechanical operation of the vehicles, but also knowledge of atmospheric conditions, stellar navigation, and what the texts call the secrets of becoming invisible. The training manuals describe techniques for flying in different weather conditions, methods for avoiding detection by enemies, and procedures for combat operations that read remarkably like modern military aviation handbooks. Perhaps most intriguing are the descriptions of aerial warfare found in the Mahabharata, the great Indian epic that tells the story of a devastating war fought between rival branches of a royal family. The text describes battles in which Vimanas engage each other in the sky, firing weapons that create explosions bright as the sun and destructive forces that can level entire cities. These weapons are given names like Brahmastra and Narayanastra, and their effects are described in terms that sound remarkably similar to modern nuclear weapons. The Brahmastra is described as a weapon that could destroy entire armies and render the earth barren for years afterward. When deployed, it created an explosion that rose like a column of fire to touch the heavens, followed by winds that carried death across vast distances. The description speaks of hair and nails falling out, of food becoming poisonous, and of warriors throwing themselves into rivers to wash off the invisible contamination that clung to their bodies. Even more terrifying was the Narayanastra, a weapon that supposedly grew more powerful as the enemy resisted it. The only defense against this weapon was complete submission, laying down all arms and surrender. Those who continued to fight found that their own resistance fed the weapon's power, creating a destructive force that could consume entire regions. The ancient texts describe cities that were themselves flying vehicles, massive vimanas capable of housing thousands of inhabitants. These aerial cities could hover motionless in the sky or travel vast distances at incredible speeds. Some were said to be invisible to earthbound observers, hidden by technologies that bent light around them or placed them slightly out of phase with normal reality. The Rama Empire, according to these sources, was a civilization that ruled much of ancient India and Southeast Asia from these flying cities. The empire's capital was said to be a magnificent aerial metropolis that could appear anywhere in the sky, moving from region to region as needed to govern the vast territories under its control. The rulers of this empire were described as godlike beings who possessed knowledge of sciences that allowed them to manipulate matter and energy in ways that seem magical to modern understanding. Archaeological evidence from the Indian subcontinent has yielded artifacts that some researchers interpret as support for these ancient accounts. In the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, cities of the Indus Valley civilization, archaeologists have found objects that don't fit easily into conventional understanding of Bronze Age technology. These include precisely machined stone vessels, complex drainage systems, and what appear to be sophisticated measuring instruments. Most controversially, some researchers have pointed to evidence of vitrification at certain ancient sites, particularly at Mohenjo-Daro. Vitrification is the process by which intense heat turns stone and sand into glass, and it requires temperatures far higher than could be achieved by conventional Bronze Age technology. Some have suggested that this vitrification could be evidence of ancient nuclear weapons, though mainstream archaeology attributes these formations to natural geological processes or conventional fires. The ancient texts also describe aircraft that could travel beyond the Earth's atmosphere, visiting what they call other lokas or worlds. These interplanetary Vimanas were said to be larger and more sophisticated than atmospheric craft, capable of journeys that took months or years. The pilots of these vehicles were described as beings of great wisdom who served as ambassadors between different worlds and civilizations. The Ramayana tells of Hanuman's leap across the ocean to Lanka, describing his journey in terms that some interpret as space travel. The text speaks of him passing through different atmospheric layers, encountering various atmospheric phenomena, and finally reaching his destination after a journey that took him far above the Earth's surface. While traditional interpretation sees this as the supernatural leap of a divine being, some modern readers find parallels with descriptions of orbital mechanics and spaceflight. Ancient Indian astronomy demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics that rivals modern knowledge in many respects. Texts like the Surya Siddhanta provide accurate calculations of planetary orbits, eclipse predictions, and stellar positions that could only have been developed through centuries of careful observation. This astronomical knowledge was intimately connected with the Vimana literature, suggesting that the ancients saw air and space travel as natural extensions of their understanding of celestial movements. The technology described in these ancient texts includes features that sound remarkably similar to modern concepts in physics and engineering. Descriptions of force fields, electromagnetic propulsion, and materials with programmable properties echo current research into advanced aerospace technologies. While it's impossible to verify whether these ancient descriptions represent actual technologies or remarkably prescient imagination, their technical sophistication is undeniable. The social implications of Vimana technology, as described in the ancient texts, were profound. The ability to travel rapidly across vast distances transformed concepts of governance, trade, and warfare. The Rama Empire was said to maintain control over its territories through a network of aerial patrols and communication systems that allowed instant contact between distant regions. This created a level of political and economic integration that wouldn't be seen again until the modern era. The texts also describe the moral and spiritual requirements placed on those who operated Vimana technology. The pilots were said to be members of a priestly class who underwent years of training not only in the technical aspects of flight, but also in the ethical responsibilities that came with such power. The ability to rain destruction from the sky was balanced by strict codes of conduct that limited when and how such weapons could be used. The decline of Vimana technology, according to the ancient sources, came about through moral corruption and the misuse of these powerful tools. The Great War described in the Mahabharata was fought partly over control of these technologies, and their destructive potential ultimately led to their abandonment or concealment. The surviving texts suggest that the knowledge was deliberately hidden to prevent its misuse by future generations who might lack the spiritual development necessary to use it wisely. Some researchers have noted parallels between these ancient Indian accounts and similar stories from other cultures around the world. The Bible speaks of Ezekiel's wheel, a flying vehicle that could move in any direction and was covered with eyes that might represent sensors or windows. Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki traveling in flying boats, while Egyptian hieroglyphs show what some interpret as aircraft or spacecraft. The persistence of these aerial themes across multiple ancient civilizations raises intriguing questions about whether they represent shared mythological archetypes or memories of actual historical events. The technical consistency of many descriptions, particularly in the Sanskrit texts, suggests a level of systematic knowledge that goes beyond simple storytelling or religious allegory. Modern attempts to reconstruct Vimana technology based on ancient descriptions have yielded mixed results. While some of the principles described in the texts align with current understanding of physics, others invoke forces and materials that remain beyond our current technological capabilities. This has led some researchers to suggest that the ancients possessed scientific knowledge that was later lost, while others argue that the descriptions represent symbolic rather than literal accounts. As we contemplate these ancient tales of flying machines and aerial warfare, we are reminded that human imagination has always reached toward the sky, dreaming of the freedom and power that flight represents. Whether the Vimanas were real vehicles or symbolic expressions of spiritual transcendence, they speak to timeless human aspirations that continue to drive our own exploration of the heavens. In the quiet of night, when we look up at stars that guided ancient navigators across earthly and celestial oceans, we might imagine the sound of Vimanas passing overhead, their pilots carrying messages between worlds and wisdom between civilizations. The sky remembers what the earth has forgotten, and in its vast expanse, the dreams of ancient aviators continue their eternal flight through the realm of human possibility. Beyond the western horizon, where the sun disappears each evening into waters that early explorers believed led to the edge of the world, lay the Americas, continents that harbored civilizations whose origins stretch back into the mists of prehistory. These were lands of golden cities and mysterious builders, of island homelands lost to legend and mountain strongholds hidden in clouds. From the deserts of the Southwest to the peaks of the Andes, from the jungles of Mexico to the coastal plains of Peru, the Americas tell stories of peoples who created wonders and then vanished, leaving behind monuments that continue to puzzle modern archaeologists. The Aztecs, who built their magnificent capital of Tenochtitlan on an island in Lake Texcoco, preserved memories of an even earlier homeland called Aztlan, the place of herons. According to their sacred histories, Aztlan was an island paradise where their ancestors lived in peace and abundance before beginning the great migration that would eventually lead them to the Valley of Mexico. This mythical homeland was described as a place of white houses and clear waters where the Aztecs' forebears enjoyed a golden age before being commanded by their god Huitzilopochtli to seek a new home in the south. The search for Aztlan has captivated researchers for centuries, with proposed locations ranging from islands off the California coast to hidden valleys in the American Southwest. Some scholars suggest that Aztlan may have been a real place, perhaps located along the shores of ancient Lake Cahuilla in California or on islands that once existed in the Gulf of California before geological changes altered the coastline. The Aztec migration stories speak of crossing large bodies of water and traveling through desert regions, details that could describe the journey from such a homeland to central Mexico. Archaeological evidence suggests that the ancestors of the Aztecs may indeed have originated in the American Southwest, where the remains of sophisticated agricultural societies show cultural connections to later Mesoamerican civilizations. The Hohokam people of Arizona created extensive irrigation systems that transformed desert valleys into productive farmland, while the ancestral Puebloans built magnificent cliff dwellings and ceremonial centers that demonstrate advanced knowledge of astronomy and engineering. These southwestern cultures preserved their own legends of earlier homelands and lost cities, stories that would later capture the imagination of Spanish conquistadors searching for treasure in the New World. The Seven Cities of Cibola became one of the most persistent legends of the colonial period, described as golden cities that glowed in the desert sun and held riches beyond imagination. These tales were based partly on Native American oral traditions and partly on the wishful thinking of explorers who hoped to find another Aztec empire to plunder. The Hopi people of Arizona maintain traditions that speak of previous worlds that were destroyed when humanity strayed from the path of harmony with nature. Their legends describe a series of migrations across the Americas, guided by spiritual instructions and marked by the construction of sacred sites that would serve as waypoints for future generations. Some of these traditions speak of cities built on mesas and in canyons, places where ancient knowledge was preserved through times of great change and upheaval. Coronado's expedition in 1540 searched for the 7 cities of Cibola across the deserts of New Mexico and Arizona, finding instead the modest pueblos of the Zuni people. Yet the conquistadors' disappointment may have been premature, for modern archaeology has revealed that the Southwest was indeed home to urban centers of considerable sophistication. Chaco Canyon in New Mexico contains the remains of what appears to have been a major ceremonial and administrative center, with great houses that required advanced engineering to construct and road networks that connected distant communities across hundreds of miles. The builders of Chaco Canyon, often called the Chacoans, created a civilization that flourished between 800 and 1200 AD. Their great houses were multi-story structures that contained hundreds of rooms, far more space than would have been needed by the local population. Some researchers suggest that these buildings served as seasonal gathering places for people from across the region, centers where trade, ceremony, and the exchange of knowledge took place on a scale that recalls the great cities of other ancient civilizations. The mystery of Chaco Canyon deepens when we consider the astronomical alignments built into its architecture. Many of the great houses are oriented towards significant celestial events, including solstices, equinoxes, and lunar standstills. The famous Pueblo Bonito contains walls and doorways that frame the rising and setting of specific stars and planets, suggesting that the Chacoans possessed sophisticated knowledge of astronomy that they incorporated into their sacred architecture. Far to the south, in the coastal deserts of Peru, an even older mystery awaits discovery. The city of Caral, built along the Supa River Valley, has been dated to approximately 2600 BC, making it one of the oldest urban centers in the Americas. Unlike many ancient cities that show evidence of warfare and social stratification, Caral appears to have been a peaceful civilization dedicated to trade, agriculture, and what can only be described as scientific research. The people of Caral built their city without fortifications, suggesting a society that had no need to fear attack from neighbors. Instead, they constructed pyramids, plazas, and residential areas that speak of a culture focused on communal activities and shared knowledge. Archaeological excavations have revealed sophisticated irrigation systems, textile workshops, and what appear to be astronomical observation platforms. Most remarkably, the inhabitants of Caral seem to have developed a complex understanding of mathematics and engineering without the use of written language as we understand it. The absence of warfare at Caral is particularly striking when compared to other ancient civilizations of similar age and complexity. While the Sumerians, Egyptians, and early Chinese civilizations all show evidence of military conflicts and social hierarchies based on conquest, the Caral culture appears to have organized itself around principles of cooperation and shared prosperity. This peaceful approach to civilization building may explain why Caral remained unknown to archaeology until the late 20th century, as it left behind no dramatic conquest narratives or military monuments to mark its achievement. The technology developed at Caral included advanced earthquake-resistant construction techniques that are still studied by modern engineers. The builders used a system of stone and reed bundles that allowed their structures to flex during seismic activity, a crucial adaptation in a region prone to powerful earthquakes. This knowledge seems to have been passed down through generations of Andean civilizations, influencing the construction techniques later used by the Inca and their predecessors. The mystery of how such sophisticated civilizations arose in the Americas has led some researchers to propose connections with Old World cultures or even earlier unknown civilizations. The precision of Andean stonework, with blocks fitted so tightly that no mortar was needed, recalls similar techniques found in Egypt and the Mediterranean. The astronomical knowledge demonstrated by various American cultures parallels developments in Babylon and India, raising questions about whether these similarities represent independent invention or some form of cultural exchange. One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence for possible transoceanic contact comes from the Bahamas, where underwater formations known as the Bimini Road have sparked decades of debate. These linear arrangements of limestone blocks lying in shallow water off the coast of Bimini have been interpreted by some as evidence of an ancient harbor or causeway. While most geologists believe the formations are natural, their regular arrangement and apparent artificial modification continue to fuel speculation about unknown maritime civilizations. The timing of the Bimini formations, if they are indeed artificial, would place their construction during the period when sea levels were much lower than today. During the Ice Age, much of what is now the shallow Bahama banks would have been dry land, providing ample space for coastal settlements and harbor facilities. The subsequent rise in sea level would have submerged these installations, leaving only the most substantial foundations visible to modern divers. Throughout the Americas, from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, indigenous traditions preserve memories of great floods, migrations, and lost homelands that echo themes found in other global flood mythologies. The consistency of these stories across cultures that had no contact with each other during historical times suggests either shared ancient experiences or common responses to similar environmental changes. The end of the Ice Age brought dramatic alterations to coastlines worldwide, and many thriving communities would have found their homes submerged beneath rising seas. The Inca preserved legends of Viracocha, a bearded figure who emerged from Lake Titicaca to teach the arts of civilization before departing across the Pacific Ocean. This culture hero was said to have possessed knowledge of astronomy, agriculture, and architecture that transformed the scattered tribes of the Andes into a unified civilization. Similar stories of culture bearers arriving from across the water appear in traditions throughout the Americas, from the Aztec Quetzalcoatl to the Maya Kukulkan. These teaching figures are typically described as bringing not just practical knowledge but also spiritual wisdom and moral codes that emphasized harmony with nature and responsibility to future generations. Their influence is seen in the astronomical alignments of American monuments, the sophisticated agricultural systems that sustained large populations in challenging environments, and the artistic traditions that celebrated the interconnectedness of all life. The peaceful nature of many early American civilizations, from Caral to the early stages of Pueblo culture, suggests that the Americas may have served as laboratories for alternative approaches to social organization. Without the constant pressure of warfare that shaped Old World civilizations, American societies had the opportunity to explore systems based on cooperation, environmental harmony, and shared knowledge rather than conquest and domination. The decline of these peaceful civilizations often coincided with periods of environmental stress, particularly extended droughts that made their sophisticated agricultural systems untenable. The abandonment of Chaco Canyon, the collapse of various Maya cities, and the transformation of other American cultures can often be traced to climate changes that overwhelmed even their advanced environmental management techniques. Yet the knowledge developed by these civilizations was not lost entirely. Indigenous communities throughout the Americas maintained traditions of astronomical observation, sustainable agriculture, and social organization that sustained them through centuries of dramatic change. The arrival of European diseases and colonization disrupted these traditions, but many survived in modified form, carrying forward wisdom that may prove essential for addressing modern environmental challenges. As we contemplate the forgotten Americas and their lost cities, we are reminded that human civilization has taken many forms throughout history. The golden cities sought by Spanish conquistadors may not have been filled with treasure in the form they expected, but they contained riches of knowledge and wisdom that continue to illuminate alternative paths for human development. In the silence of abandoned pueblos, in the precise stonework of Andean terraces, and in the star-aligned pyramids of ancient observatories, we hear the voices of peoples who found ways to thrive in harmony with their environment while reaching toward understanding of the cosmos that surrounds us all. In the marshy deltas where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers meet the Persian Gulf, where reed beds stretch to the horizon and ancient waterways carve channels through landscapes older than memory, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of humanity's first experiments with urban civilization. Here, in the cradle between the rivers, the Sumerians built their cities and developed the foundations of written language, organized government, and complex society. Yet their own records speak of an even earlier time, a golden age before the Great Flood, when kings ruled for thousands of years and the gods walked among mortals in cities that have since vanished beneath the waves. The city of Eridu holds a special place in Sumerian memory as the first city ever built, the place where civilization itself began. According to the Sumerian king list, Eridu was founded by the god Enki, who rose from the sweet waters of the Abzu to establish the first temple and teach humanity the arts of civilization. Archaeological excavations at Tel Abu Shahrain, the modern site of ancient Eridu, have revealed a sequence of temples stretching back more than 7,000 years, making it one of the oldest continuously occupied sacred sites in the world. The earliest levels at Eridu show a simple shrine built on a small mound surrounded by marshland, but over time this humble beginning grew into an elaborate temple complex that served as the prototype for all later Mesopotamian architecture. The progression from simple reed huts to sophisticated mud brick temples tells the story of humanity's gradual mastery over its environment. Yet Sumerian texts suggest that this development was guided by divine teachers who possessed knowledge far beyond what early humans could have developed on their own. The Sumerian king list presents a puzzle that has challenged scholars for generations. It records the reigns of antediluvian kings who ruled for impossibly long periods, some for tens of thousands of years. Modern historians generally interpret these figures as mythological, assuming that the Sumerians inflated the achievements of their legendary ancestors. Yet the list transitions smoothly from these mythical early rulers to historically verified kings, maintaining the same format and literary style throughout. The transition point in the king list comes with the Great Flood, described in terms that closely parallel the biblical account of Noah and the global flood traditions found in cultures worldwide. After the flood, the text notes the kingship descended again from heaven, but the reigns of individual rulers became much shorter, more in line with normal human lifespans. This suggests that the Sumerians viewed the flood as a decisive break between two different eras of human history. The Epic of Gilgamesh, perhaps the world's oldest surviving work of literature, preserves detailed memories of the flood and the world that existed before it. In this ancient poem, the hero Gilgamesh encounters Utnapishtim, the Sumerian equivalent of Noah, who survived the Great Deluge by building a massive boat according to divine instructions. Utnapishtim's account describes a catastrophe that destroyed all life except for those preserved in his vessel, after which the gods repented of their harsh judgment and promised never again to destroy the world so completely. The flood story appears not only in Mesopotamian literature but in the traditions of cultures around the world, from the Hindu Puranas to the legends of Native American tribes. The consistency of these accounts across cultures that had no historical contact suggests either a shared mythological archetype or the preservation of actual memories from a time when much of the world's population lived in coastal areas that were subsequently submerged by rising sea levels. Geological evidence supports the possibility that the Persian Gulf region experienced dramatic flooding at the end of the last ice age. When the great ice sheets melted, sea levels rose by hundreds of feet, transforming the geography of the entire region. What is now the Persian Gulf was once a fertile river valley where early agricultural communities could have flourished. The flooding of this valley would have displaced thousands of people and submerged any cities or settlements that existed there. Recent underwater archaeology in the Persian Gulf has revealed evidence of human habitation on what are now submerged areas of the continental shelf. Stone tools and other artifacts have been found at depths that could only have been dry land during the Ice Age, confirming that human populations lived in areas that are now underwater. While no underwater cities have been definitively identified, the possibility remains that more substantial settlements await discovery beneath the Gulf's shallow waters. The mysterious land of Dilmun occupies a central place in Sumerian mythology as a paradise that existed before the flood. Described as a place where death and disease were unknown, where the lion did not kill and the wolf did not devour the lamb, Dilmun was said to be the homeland of the gods and the source of all fresh water. Some scholars have identified Dilmun with the island of Bahrain, which was indeed an important trading center in ancient times, but others suggest that the mythical paradise may have been located on now submerged lands in the Persian Gulf. The Sumerian creation myth describes how the god Enki transformed Dilmun from a dry, waterless land into a fertile paradise by causing fresh water to spring from the earth. This transformation is described in terms that suggest sophisticated irrigation technology, with networks of canals and water management systems that allowed agriculture to flourish in previously barren areas. The technical knowledge implied by these descriptions seems remarkably advanced for supposedly primitive early civilizations. Sumerian religious texts speak of the Anunnaki, divine beings who descended from heaven to earth in the earliest times to establish civilization among humanity. These figures are described as possessing great knowledge and power, teaching humans the arts of agriculture, writing, and urban planning. The Anunnaki are said to have built the first cities and established the first kingdoms, serving as the divine prototypes for later human rulers. The description of the Anunnaki's arrival often includes details that some modern readers interpret as descriptions of advanced technology. They are said to have traveled in celestial boats, to have possessed the power of flight, and to have carried out great engineering projects that transformed the landscape. While traditional scholarship interprets these descriptions as mythological expressions of divine power, their technical specificity has led some researchers to wonder whether they might preserve memories of actual historical events. The Sumerian pantheon includes detailed genealogies and relationships among the gods that mirror the complex political structures of early Mesopotamian city-states. Each major city had its patron deity, and the relationships between these gods often reflected the political alliances and conflicts between their respective cities. This suggests that Sumerian religion may have evolved from memories of actual historical figures whose achievements were gradually mythologized over time. The technology described in Sumerian texts includes references to devices and capabilities that seem anachronistic for Bronze Age civilizations. The god Ninurta is described as possessing a weapon called the Sharur, which could fly independently and report back on distant enemies. Inanna travels between heaven and earth in what is described as a boat of heaven, while Enlil possesses tablets that can record and transmit information across vast distances. The mathematical and astronomical knowledge demonstrated in Sumerian texts rivals that of much later civilizations. They developed a sophisticated number system based on multiples of 60 that is still used today for measuring time and angles. Their astronomical observations were precise enough to predict eclipses and planetary movements, and they created detailed star catalogues that served as the foundation for later Babylonian and Greek astronomy. The Sumerian understanding of medicine included surgical procedures, pharmaceutical preparations, and diagnostic techniques that suggest a level of empirical knowledge that seems surprisingly advanced for its time. Medical texts describe treatments for various ailments using precise dosages and preparation methods, while surgical manuals provide step-by-step instructions for complex operations. This medical knowledge appears to have been systematically organized and taught, suggesting the existence of formal medical schools or training programs. The collapse of Sumerian civilization around 2000 BC has been attributed to various factors, including climate change, political instability, and the rise of competing powers. However, Sumerian influence persisted in the cultures that succeeded them, with later Mesopotamian civilizations adopting and adapting Sumerian religious concepts, technological innovations, and literary traditions. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians all acknowledged their debt to Sumerian culture, preserving and transmitting Sumerian knowledge across millennia. The Dead Sea and other salt lakes in the region may preserve additional clues about the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia. These bodies of water have been gradually shrinking over thousands of years, potentially exposing archaeological sites that were submerged in ancient times. Recent discoveries around the Dead Sea have revealed evidence of human habitation dating back many thousands of years, including sophisticated water management systems and urban planning that suggests more advanced civilizations than previously believed. The genetic legacy of the Sumerians can still be traced in modern populations throughout the Middle East and beyond. Studies of ancient DNA have revealed complex patterns of migration and cultural exchange that connect the earliest Mesopotamian civilizations with populations throughout Eurasia. These genetic connections suggest that the influence of early Mesopotamian cultures extended far beyond their geographical boundaries, spreading technological and cultural innovations across vast distances. The cuneiform writing system developed by the Sumerians became the foundation for literacy throughout the ancient Middle East, with adaptations used by dozens of different languages and cultures. The preservation of Sumerian texts in cuneiform libraries has provided us with an unparalleled window into the thoughts and beliefs of humanity's earliest urban civilizations. These texts reveal a sophisticated understanding of law, literature, religion, and science that challenges assumptions about the capabilities of ancient peoples. The mystery of the pre-flood world described in Sumerian texts continues to intrigue researchers and inspire speculation about lost civilizations. Whether these accounts preserve actual historical memories or represent mythological expressions of universal human experiences, they remind us that our understanding of the past is constantly evolving as new discoveries shed light on the complexity and sophistication of ancient cultures. In the shifting sands of Mesopotamia, where ancient tells rise like islands from the desert floor and the remains of humanity's first cities lie buried beneath millennia of accumulated earth, we sense the presence of those who first dared to dream of permanent settlements, written laws, and organized society. Their experiments with civilization laid the foundation for all that followed, and their memories of an even earlier golden age remind us that human history may extend much further into the past than we have yet discovered. The DNA of our forgotten world lives on in the traditions, technologies, and dreams that continue to shape human civilization today. At the very edge of the ancient world, beyond the reach of Boreas the North Wind, Greek tradition placed a mysterious land called Hyperborea, where the sun never set and eternal spring reigned over a golden civilization. This was a realm that existed beyond the known boundaries of geography, a place where Apollo himself was said to spend the winter months when he departed from his temple at Delphi. The Hyperboreans were described as a blessed people who lived for 1,000 years in perfect health and happiness, untouched by war, disease, or the harsh realities that plagued the rest of humanity. The very name Hyperborea means beyond the north wind, suggesting a land so far north that even the bitter Arctic gales could not reach it. Yet this geographical impossibility was described by ancient writers not as a mythical realm, but as an actual place that could be visited by those brave enough to undertake the perilous journey. Herodotus, the father of history, wrote of Hyperborean emissaries who traveled to the sacred island of Delos carrying offerings wrapped in wheat straw, gifts from their distant homeland to the god Apollo. According to Greek tradition, the Hyperboreans were the most beloved of all peoples by Apollo, the god of light, music, and prophecy. Their land was described as a paradise where sacred groves grew in perfect circles, where the air rang with perpetual music, and where the inhabitants spent their days in celebration and contemplation. No weapons existed in Hyperborea, for violence was unknown among its peaceful inhabitants. When a Hyperborean grew tired of life after their millennium of existence, they would crown themselves with flowers and leap joyfully from a sacred cliff into the sea. The puzzle of Hyperborea becomes even more intriguing when we consider the astronomical details preserved in ancient descriptions. The land was said to experience continuous daylight for 6 months of the year, followed by 6 months of darkness. This phenomenon, impossible in temperate regions, perfectly describes the conditions found in the Arctic regions during the polar day and polar night cycles. Could the ancient Greeks have possessed knowledge of Arctic conditions that modern scholarship assumes was unknown to them? Some researchers have suggested that Hyperborea might preserve cultural memories of a time when the Arctic regions were indeed habitable, perhaps during an interglacial period when global temperatures were warmer than today. During such periods, areas that are now covered by ice and permafrost could have supported human settlement, and the unique lighting conditions of the far north would have created the eternal daylight described in the myths. The concept becomes even more fascinating when we consider recent discoveries in the Siberian permafrost. Frozen mammoths have been found with tropical plants still preserved in their stomachs, suggesting that these animals were grazing on vegetation that could only grow in temperate climates when they were suddenly frozen. The speed of this freezing appears to have been so rapid that the animals had no time to migrate or adapt, implying a catastrophic climate change that transformed temperate regions into Arctic wasteland almost overnight. These permafrost discoveries challenge conventional understanding of how ice ages develop and end. Instead of the gradual climate changes that most models predict, the evidence suggests that dramatic shifts in temperature and weather patterns can occur with startling rapidity. A region that supported forests and grasslands could become an Arctic desert in a matter of years or even months, preserving within the ice a snapshot of more hospitable times. The possibility of rapid polar shifts has been proposed by some researchers as an explanation for both the mammoth discoveries and the Hyperborean traditions. If the Earth's magnetic or rotational poles shifted suddenly, areas that were once temperate could find themselves relocated to polar regions, while previously Arctic areas might enjoy more moderate climates. Such shifts would explain how a civilization could exist in the far north during certain periods while being impossible during others. Ancient Hindu texts describe similar concepts of shifting world ages and changing global conditions. The yugas, or world cycles, describe periods when the Earth itself moves through different states of spiritual and physical development. During the Satya Yuga, or Golden Age, conditions on Earth were said to be paradisiacal, with perfect climate and abundant natural resources supporting advanced civilizations. As the world cycles progressed through the Treta and Dvapara Yugas toward the current Kali Yuga, conditions gradually deteriorated. The Norse tradition of Thule represents another northern paradise, described as the ultimate northern land where the sun never sets during summer months. Medieval geographers placed Thule at various locations, from Iceland to northern Scotland, but always as the northernmost point of the habitable world. Like Hyperborea, Thule was associated with mystical properties and served as a symbol of the ultimate frontier of human knowledge and exploration. The Aurora Borealis, or Northern Lights, feature prominently in Hyperborean traditions and may provide another clue to understanding these mysterious accounts. Ancient descriptions of the aurora often emphasize the musical qualities of the phenomenon, describing celestial harmonies that accompany the dancing lights. This acoustic component of the aurora has been verified by modern science, which has discovered that the geomagnetic disturbances that create the lights also generate very low-frequency radio waves that can sometimes be heard as musical tones. The emphasis on music and harmony in Hyperborean traditions may reflect actual experiences of people living in northern regions where the aurora was regularly visible. The combination of the visual spectacle of the northern lights with their acoustic effects could easily have inspired descriptions of a land where celestial music filled the air and the gods themselves danced across the sky. Ancient maps sometimes show landmasses in the Arctic regions that are not present in modern geography. The Mercator map of 1569 depicts 4 large islands surrounding the North Pole, separated by channels that were supposed to lead to a warm polar sea. While these features were likely based on theoretical speculation rather than actual exploration, they demonstrate that medieval geographers believed the Arctic regions might contain habitable lands hidden beneath the ice. The concept of a warm polar sea was not entirely fanciful, as oceanographic research has revealed that the Arctic Ocean does indeed contain currents of relatively warm water that flow beneath the ice. During periods of reduced ice coverage, these currents could have supported a more temperate environment in polar regions. If such conditions existed during human prehistory, they could have allowed for the development of the northern civilizations described in various mythological traditions. The Theosophical movement of the late 1900s embraced the concept of Hyperborea as one of the root races of humanity, describing a northern civilization that possessed advanced spiritual and technological capabilities. Helena Blavatsky and her followers placed Hyperborea in the Arctic regions during an earlier geological epoch, when conditions there were supposedly more favorable for human habitation. According to Theosophical teaching, the Hyperboreans were ethereal beings who gradually became more physical as they evolved toward the current human form. These theosophical concepts gained unfortunate political significance during the early 20th century when they were adopted and perverted by various nationalist movements. The idea of a superior Arctic race was incorporated into Nazi ideology, leading to expeditions and research programs that sought to find evidence for Aryan origins in polar regions. These political appropriations have unfortunately clouded serious research into the possible historical basis for northern civilization traditions. Modern archaeological discoveries in the Arctic regions have revealed evidence of human habitation that extends much further back in time than previously believed. Inuit traditions speak of earlier peoples who possessed different technologies and ways of life, while archaeological sites in Siberia and Alaska show evidence of sophisticated tool-making and artistic traditions that developed in harsh northern environments thousands of years ago. The Beringia land bridge that connected Asia and North America during Ice Age periods supported its own ecosystem and human populations for thousands of years before rising sea levels submerged it. This vast region, now underwater, was home to cultures that adapted to unique environmental conditions and developed technologies specifically suited to life in periglacial environments. The flooding of Beringia would have displaced these populations and destroyed evidence of their achievements, leaving only fragmentary traces of their existence. Recent climate research has revealed that the Arctic regions have experienced much more dramatic variations in temperature and ice coverage than previously understood. Periods of significantly reduced ice, known as Arctic warming events, have occurred multiple times during the past 100,000 years. During these periods, large areas of the Arctic Ocean would have been ice-free, potentially allowing for navigation and even settlement in regions that are currently inaccessible. The concept of magnetic pole reversals adds another dimension to understanding possible Arctic civilizations. During periods when the Earth's magnetic field is weak or reversed, the protective effect that normally shields us from cosmic radiation is reduced. This could make certain latitudes more or less habitable depending on the configuration of the magnetic field. Some researchers have suggested that ancient peoples might have been more aware of these magnetic variations than modern science gives them credit for. Traditional Arctic cultures demonstrate sophisticated understanding of ice conditions, weather patterns, and navigation techniques that allow them to thrive in environments that would quickly prove fatal to most modern people. The Inuit ability to navigate across seemingly featureless ice fields, to predict weather changes from subtle environmental cues, and to locate resources in apparently barren landscapes represents knowledge accumulated over thousands of years of Arctic adaptation. The oral traditions of Arctic peoples preserve memories that may extend back to the earliest periods of human habitation in polar regions. Stories of times when the ice was different, when certain areas were warmer or more accessible, and of encounters with other peoples who possessed different technologies, could represent cultural memories of the environmental changes that have shaped Arctic regions over millennia. Astronomical observations from Arctic regions would have been unique in the ancient world, offering perspectives on celestial movements that were impossible from lower latitudes. The continuous daylight and darkness cycles, the behavior of the aurora, and the movements of stars and planets as seen from polar regions could have led to astronomical knowledge and calendrical systems very different from those developed in temperate zones. As we contemplate the mystery of Hyperborea and the possible existence of ancient Arctic civilizations, we are reminded that our planet's climate history includes periods of dramatic change that could have supported human societies in regions that seem impossible today. Whether Hyperborea existed as a literal northern paradise or represents symbolic memories of humanity's adaptation to changing environmental conditions, these traditions speak to our species' remarkable ability to find ways of thriving even at the very edges of the habitable world. In the endless dance of the aurora across polar skies, in the strange acoustic phenomena that accompany geomagnetic storms, and in the vast silences of the Arctic night, we might indeed sense echoes of those who once called the far north home. The ice remembers what the wind has carried away, and in the deep cold of polar regions, the dreams of ancient northern dwellers sleep beneath layers of snow and time, waiting for the right conditions to emerge once again into the light of an Arctic summer that never ends. In the ancient texts that have been preserved in hidden libraries and monastery vaults, in the apocryphal writings that were deemed too dangerous or mysterious for inclusion in canonical scripture, we find stories of knowledge that predates known history and civilizations that possessed wisdom far beyond what their supposed primitive state should have allowed. These are the accounts of Enoch, who walked with angels and was shown the secrets of heaven and earth, and of the city built by Cain in the land of Nod, where the first technologies of civilization were supposedly developed by those who had been cast out from the Garden of Innocence. The Book of Enoch, preserved in Ethiopic manuscripts and fragments found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, tells a story that challenges conventional understanding of human development. According to this ancient text, 200 angels descended to Mount Hermon in the days before the Great Flood, taking human wives and revealing to humanity knowledge that was meant to remain hidden. These watchers, as they were called, taught humans the arts of metalworking, cosmetics, astronomy, and warfare, technologies that transformed scattered tribes into organized civilizations. The leader of these fallen angels, Azazel, is specifically credited with teaching humans how to forge weapons of war and create ornaments of vanity. Other watchers revealed the secrets of herbal medicine, the movements of celestial bodies, and the interpretation of signs and portents. Semjaza taught the art of enchantments and root cutting, while Barakijal revealed astrology and Kokabel showed the constellations. Each angel contributed specialized knowledge that elevated human capabilities far beyond what should have been possible for early humanity. The offspring of these unions between angels and humans were the Nephilim, giants who possessed extraordinary strength and capabilities. These beings are described as consuming vast quantities of food and eventually turning to cannibalism when the earth could no longer sustain their appetites. The Nephilim became mighty warriors and builders, creating cities and monuments that amazed their contemporaries, yet their presence on earth was seen as a corruption of divine order, leading ultimately to the decision to cleanse the world through flood. Enoch himself occupies a unique position in these accounts as the one human who was deemed worthy to receive divine knowledge directly. He was taken by angels on a journey through the seven heavens, shown the dwelling places of the righteous and the punishment of the wicked, and given detailed information about the structure of the cosmos. The secrets revealed to Enoch included the calendar of 364 days, the movements of sun and moon, and the hidden names of the angels who govern different aspects of creation. The technological knowledge attributed to the Watchers includes descriptions that seem remarkably sophisticated for supposedly primitive times. The art of metalworking revealed by Azazel is described in terms that suggest advanced smelting techniques and the creation of alloys unknown to conventional Bronze Age technology. The astronomical knowledge shared by other angels included understanding of planetary cycles, eclipse prediction, and stellar navigation that rivals modern capabilities. Perhaps most intriguingly, the Book of Enoch describes tablets of heaven on which all knowledge is recorded, eternal documents that contain the secrets of past, present, and future. Enoch is allowed to read from these tablets and is commanded to transmit their knowledge to future generations. This concept of preserved divine knowledge echoes similar themes in Sumerian, Egyptian, and Hindu traditions, all of which speak of wisdom that was recorded in imperishable form by divine beings or enlightened masters. The land of Nod, mentioned briefly in Genesis as the destination of Cain after his exile from Eden, becomes in later traditions the site of humanity's first urban civilization. According to these accounts, Cain built a city and named it after his son Enoch, creating the first permanent settlement and establishing the foundations of organized society. This city in Nod is described as the place where the arts of civilization were first developed, including agriculture, animal husbandry, metalworking, and music. The descendants of Cain are credited with major technological innovations that shaped human development. Jabal is described as the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock, essentially the inventor of pastoral nomadism. His brother Jubal is called the father of all who play the harp and flute, the originator of musical arts. Their half-brother Tubal-Cain is described as the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron, the first metallurgist who taught humans how to work with metals. These technological developments attributed to the descendants of Cain represent a complete transformation of human society from hunter-gatherer to complex civilization in just a few generations. The rapidity of this development seems impossible unless we assume that the knowledge involved was not gradually discovered, but was taught by those who already possessed it. The parallel with the Watchers who revealed forbidden knowledge suggests that early human technological development may have received guidance from sources that conventional history does not acknowledge. The concept of forbidden knowledge appears consistently across ancient traditions, always with the implication that certain information is too powerful or dangerous for ordinary human society. The Watchers are punished for revealing heavenly secrets to humanity, while Prometheus in Greek mythology suffers eternal torment for bringing fire to mortals. The Hindu tradition speaks of weapons and technologies that were deliberately hidden or destroyed because their misuse could threaten the stability of the world itself. The preservation of secret knowledge in hidden repositories becomes a recurring theme in ancient literature. The emerald tablets of Thoth are said to contain alchemical wisdom that can transmute both matter and consciousness. The Akashic records of Hindu tradition preserve the complete history of all souls and all events in cosmic memory. The Hall of Records supposedly hidden beneath the Sphinx contains the accumulated wisdom of Atlantis, waiting for humanity to become mature enough to receive it safely. Jewish mystical tradition, particularly in the Kabbalah, develops elaborate systems for understanding the hidden aspects of reality that were supposedly revealed to chosen individuals throughout history. The Tree of Life, with its 10 sephirot and 22 connecting paths, represents a map of cosmic structure that encompasses both the macrocosm of universal creation and the microcosm of human consciousness. This knowledge is described as having been passed down through a chain of initiated masters from Adam through Moses to the rabbinical sages. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in caves near Qumran, have revealed the existence of Jewish communities that preserved elaborate traditions of angelic lore and cosmic knowledge. These texts describe in detail the hierarchy of angels, the structure of the heavenly realms, and the cycles of time that govern earthly events. The level of sophistication in these writings suggests that ancient Jewish mystics possessed systematic knowledge of metaphysical principles that rival any later esoteric tradition. Similar traditions of preserved ancient wisdom appear in other cultures around the world. The Vedas of India are described as eternal knowledge that was heard by ancient seers and transmitted through oral tradition with perfect accuracy for thousands of years. The I Ching of China claims to encode the fundamental patterns underlying all change and transformation in the universe. The Popol Vuh of the Maya preserves creation stories that include detailed astronomical information and prophecies extending far into the future. The technological descriptions found in these ancient texts often include details that seem to anticipate modern scientific discoveries. Enochian literature describes flying vehicles, long-distance communication devices, and weapons that harness natural forces in ways that parallel contemporary technology. While skeptics argue that these descriptions are either later interpolations or represent primitive misunderstandings of natural phenomena, the consistency and specificity of the accounts across different traditions is remarkable. The calendar revealed to Enoch, based on a year of 364 days divided into 4 seasons of exactly 91 days each, demonstrates sophisticated astronomical knowledge that was supposedly unknown to ancient peoples. This calendar accurately tracks solar movements and provides a framework for predicting celestial events with remarkable precision. The fact that this system appears in texts that predate known astronomical traditions raises questions about the sources of ancient scientific knowledge. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal evidence of ancient technological capabilities that don't fit conventional timelines of human development. The Antikythera mechanism, a complex bronze device that accurately modeled planetary movements, was created by Greek craftsmen around 100 BC using techniques that weren't supposed to be rediscovered until the Renaissance. Similar examples of anomalous technology appear in various ancient contexts, suggesting that technological knowledge may have been more advanced and more widely distributed than commonly believed. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria, the burning of the Maya codices, and similar losses of ancient texts throughout history have created enormous gaps in our understanding of what earlier civilizations knew and accomplished. The knowledge preserved in the surviving texts may represent only a tiny fraction of the wisdom that once existed, leaving us to reconstruct ancient capabilities from fragmentary evidence and symbolic descriptions. The encoding of knowledge in symbolic and metaphorical language appears to have been a deliberate strategy used by ancient wisdom keepers to preserve important information while hiding it from those who might misuse it. Alchemical texts disguise chemical and metallurgical knowledge in elaborate symbolic systems, while mystical writings encode practical spiritual techniques in mythological narratives. This approach allowed sensitive knowledge to survive periods of persecution and cultural disruption while remaining accessible to those who possessed the keys to interpretation. Modern attempts to decode these ancient symbolic systems have yielded intriguing results, with some researchers claiming to have reconstructed practical technologies and techniques from apparently mystical texts. Whether these reconstructions represent genuine recovery of ancient knowledge or creative reinterpretation of symbolic material remains a subject of ongoing debate. The tradition of hidden masters who preserve ancient wisdom through successive generations appears in cultures throughout the world. These figures are typically described as possessing knowledge that far surpasses ordinary human understanding, and they are said to emerge periodically to guide humanity through times of crisis or transition. The consistency of these traditions across different cultures suggests either a universal archetype or the existence of actual lineages of knowledge keepers who have maintained their traditions across millennia. As we contemplate these ancient accounts of revealed knowledge and hidden wisdom, we are reminded that human civilization may have developed through processes more complex than simple gradual evolution. Whether the knowledge described in these texts came from divine revelation, contact with advanced beings, or the preservation of earlier human achievements, the evidence suggests that our ancestors possessed capabilities and understanding that challenge conventional assumptions about the progression of human knowledge. In the silence of monastery libraries where ancient manuscripts sleep between covers of worn leather, in the hidden chambers beneath temples where sacred texts await rediscovery, and in the symbolic language of myths that encode practical wisdom for future generations, we sense the presence of those who sought to preserve the most precious achievements of human understanding. Their voices whisper across the centuries, reminding us that knowledge once revealed can never be completely lost, and that the seeds of wisdom planted in ancient times continue to germinate in those who approach them with appropriate reverence and understanding. As our journey through the forgotten realms draws to its close, we find ourselves standing at the convergence of countless stories, where the whispered memories of vanished civilizations weave together into a tapestry of remarkable consistency. From the sunken halls of Atlantis to the flying cities of the Rama Empire, from the underground kingdoms of Agartha to the golden paradise of Hyperborea, the same themes emerge again and again like melodies that echo across the vast symphony of human memory. In every tradition we have explored, we find accounts of sudden destruction, of golden ages that ended in catastrophe, of knowledge that was hidden away when the world changed beyond recognition. The flood myths that appear in every culture speak not just of rising waters, but of the end of entire ways of life, the submersion of wisdom beneath waves of forgetting that swept across the ancient world. Whether we interpret these accounts as literal history or symbolic truth, they point to transformative events that shaped human consciousness in ways we are still discovering. The consistency of these destruction narratives suggests experiences so profound that they became embedded in the deepest layers of cultural memory. The Younger Dryas period, that dramatic climate change that occurred around 11,700 years ago, provides a geological framework that could explain many of these traditions. As massive ice sheets melted and sea levels rose by hundreds of feet, coastal civilizations would indeed have vanished beneath the waves, leaving only scattered survivors to carry memories of what had been lost. Yet the stories speak of more than simple environmental destruction. They describe civilizations that possessed capabilities we struggle to understand even today. The precision engineering of megalithic sites, the astronomical knowledge encoded in ancient monuments, the technological sophistication hinted at in Sanskrit texts and Sumerian tablets, all point to human achievements that seem to transcend the limitations we associate with prehistoric cultures. The concept of enlightenment appears consistently across these traditions as something more than spiritual awakening. The builders of Gobekli Tepe created astronomical computers in stone. The Hyperboreans were said to live in harmony with cosmic rhythms that governed their thousand-year lifespans. The Nagas preserved wisdom in underwater cities where time flowed differently than on the surface. Each tradition speaks of consciousness expanded beyond ordinary human limitations, of awareness that encompassed cosmic cycles and planetary transformations. This expanded consciousness seems to have been intimately connected with advanced technology, but technology of a kind very different from our modern mechanical and electronic systems. The Vimanas were powered by consciousness as much as by mercury engines. The crystal technologies of Atlantis responded to mental commands. The builder civilizations shaped massive stones through understanding of vibrational frequencies that we have forgotten how to generate. The pattern suggests that these ancient cultures developed along lines that emphasized the integration of mind and matter, consciousness and technology in ways that our current civilization has yet to rediscover. Their achievements may have been based not on the accumulation of mechanical devices, but on the development of human potential itself, the cultivation of capabilities that allowed direct interaction with the fundamental forces of nature. The preservation of knowledge appears as another universal theme, with each tradition describing elaborate efforts to hide wisdom from those who might misuse it while ensuring its survival for future generations who would be ready to receive it responsibly. The deliberate burial of Gobekli Tepe, the encoding of astronomical data in stone monuments, the preservation of technical knowledge in symbolic mythologies, all speak to a systematic approach to safeguarding achievements against the chaos of changing times. This preservation was not random, but followed patterns that suggest coordinated effort across vast geographical distances. The mathematical constants found in pyramid construction appear in monuments from Egypt to Cambodia to Peru. The astronomical alignments built into ancient structures track the same celestial cycles whether they are found in Britain, Bolivia, or Babylon. The symbolic systems used to encode knowledge show striking similarities across cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. The global priesthood described in various traditions may represent the historical reality behind these patterns. Whether we call them the Watchers, the Nagas, the Shining Ones, or the culture heroes, every tradition speaks of teachers who possessed knowledge beyond their time and who worked to establish the foundations of civilization among scattered human populations. These figures are consistently described as coming from elsewhere, whether from the stars, from underground realms, or from continents that have since vanished beneath the waves. The question of whether these teachers were members of an advanced human civilization, representatives of non-human intelligence, or archetypal projections of human potential may be less important than understanding the knowledge they supposedly transmitted. The astronomical wisdom that allows prediction of precession cycles spanning 26,000 years, the engineering knowledge that enables the movement of massive stone blocks, the consciousness technologies that integrate human awareness with natural forces, all represent achievements that our current civilization is only beginning to approach. The survivors of ancient catastrophes appear to have faced a choice between preserving their advanced capabilities in hidden refuges or adapting to changed conditions by encoding their knowledge in simpler forms that could survive periods of cultural darkness. The underground cities described in various traditions may represent one strategy, while the symbolic preservation of technical knowledge in mythology and religious ritual represents another. The isolation of advanced knowledge in mystery schools and esoteric traditions throughout recorded history suggests that this preservation strategy was largely successful. From the Egyptian temple mysteries to the Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, from the Greek philosophical schools to the Renaissance alchemical laboratories, streams of ancient knowledge have flowed through human civilization like underground rivers, occasionally surfacing in individuals who demonstrated capabilities that seemed impossible for their historical period. The cyclical view of history found in Hindu, Buddhist, and other traditions provides a framework for understanding these patterns. Rather than a linear progression from primitive to advanced, these systems describe recurring cycles of golden ages followed by periods of decline and forgetfulness, with knowledge periodically rediscovered or revealed when humanity is ready to receive it again. This cyclical perspective suggests that our current technological civilization may be not the first, but the latest in a series of human achievements. The environmental themes that appear consistently in these traditions take on particular relevance as our own civilization faces ecological challenges that threaten its survival. The accounts of ancient catastrophes often emphasize the role of human actions in triggering environmental collapse. Atlantis fell because its people became prideful and aggressive. The Rama Empire destroyed itself through warfare with weapons that poisoned the earth. The builder civilizations vanished when they lost harmony with natural cycles. These stories may preserve not just historical memories but practical wisdom about the relationship between consciousness, technology, and environmental balance. The sustainable technologies hinted at in ancient texts, powered by renewable sources and integrated with natural systems, offer models that could inform our own search for ways to maintain civilization without destroying the planetary systems that support it. The emphasis on consciousness development in ancient traditions may be particularly relevant to our current challenges. If technological power without corresponding wisdom leads inevitably to destruction, then the cultivation of expanded awareness becomes not a luxury but a necessity for survival. The meditation practices preserved in various traditions, the consciousness technologies encoded in ancient texts, and the spiritual disciplines maintained in esoteric schools may represent essential knowledge for navigating the challenges of advanced civilization. The indigenous wisdom keepers who have maintained connections to these ancient traditions throughout the dark ages of forgetting may hold keys essential for understanding our past and navigating our future. Their stories, their practices, and their ways of relating to the natural world preserve perspectives that were common in the ancient civilizations we have explored but which have been largely lost in modern technological culture. The respect for these traditions and their custodians becomes not just a matter of historical interest but of practical necessity. As we face challenges that require wisdom beyond mere technical knowledge, the preserved teachings of the ancients offer resources that could prove essential for developing sustainable and harmonious ways of life. The possibility that we are the descendants of survivors, that our deepest cultural memories preserve accounts of actual historical events, suggests that we carry within ourselves the seeds of capabilities demonstrated by our ancestors. The megalithic builders, the Vimana pilots, the consciousness adepts of ancient traditions may not have been fundamentally different from ourselves, but may have developed human potential in directions that our current culture has neglected or forgotten. This perspective offers both humility and hope. Humility because it suggests that our current achievements, impressive as they may seem, pale in comparison to what humans have accomplished in other times and contexts. Hope because it implies that the capabilities demonstrated by ancient civilizations remain latent within human potential, waiting to be rediscovered and developed by those willing to undertake the necessary discipline and training. The thread that connects all these traditions is ultimately the thread of human potential itself, the recognition that consciousness is not limited to the narrow parameters that modern culture assumes, but can expand to encompass cosmic cycles, natural forces, and dimensions of reality that transcend ordinary perception. Whether these capabilities were developed through technologies we no longer understand, through spiritual practices we have forgotten, or through contact with intelligences beyond our current comprehension, matters less than the recognition that they represent real possibilities for human development. Perhaps these civilizations were not lost at all but are waiting to be remembered, waiting for us to develop the wisdom necessary to reclaim our birthright as conscious participants in the greater cosmic story. In stone monuments that encode astronomical data spanning millennia, in myths that preserve technical knowledge in symbolic form, in meditation practices that open doorways to expanded awareness, the ancients continue to teach those ready to learn. The mist that obscures our vision of the past may be clearing as we approach a time when humanity again faces the choice between wisdom and destruction, between harmony and chaos, between the integrated consciousness of the Golden Age and the fragmented awareness that leads to civilizational collapse. In this moment of choice, the whispered wisdom of the ancients becomes not historical curiosity, but practical guidance for navigating the challenges that will determine whether our own civilization joins the ranks of the remembered or becomes another forgotten chapter in the endless story of human potential seeking expression through the rise and fall of cultures across the turning wheel of time.